What's up, Craig?
I hate that so much. Welcome to Juicing the Numbers, your movies and entertainment podcast. I am your host, Joshua Tracy.
And I'm Corwin Heller.
And in this week's movie podcast, Corwin and I are talking about the 2010 film True Grit and the 2001 film The Royal Tenenbaums. Corwin, are you ready to go?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Do you want to start with The Royal Tenenbaums or True Grit?
I feel like I'm going to have more to say about True Grit. The Royal Tenenbaums. So I'll let you choose depending on how you want the flow of this podcast to go.
I actually also think I have more to say about The Royal Tenenbaums. So we'll do that second and just let True Grit be what it is. True Grit 2010, written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, starring Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, and Haley Steinfeld, as well as others, I'm assuming. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards.
Others, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Nominated for Best Motion Picture of the Year, Best Lead Actor for Jeff Bridges, Best Supporting Actress for Haley Steinfeld, Best Directing, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Costume Design, Sound Mixing, Sound Editing, and Art Direction. It is a period piece. Anyone who follows the Oscars know that period pieces are a beloved part of getting nominated for a bajillion Oscars. So the fact that it was nominated for 10, though did not win a single one, shouldn't be all too surprising if you keep up with these types of things. Anyway, it had an estimated budget of $38 million. It grossed cumulative worldwide $252.2 million. So I would say this was a rousing success. It runs just under 2 hours long, and there you have it, folks. It is, for anyone unaware, is an adaptation of a 1969 film, which in of itself, really, it's the adaptation of a novel that the 1969 film was based off of. A young teenage girl, enlists the help of a drunk old U.S. Marshal to track down her father's murderer. Corwin, what did you think of this movie?
I very much enjoyed it. Honestly, going into it, I knew I was going to like it because the Coen brothers directed, and like I said when we recorded the last podcast, that's pretty much all you need from me to enjoy a certain, style of movie. I just love the Coen brothers. I had tried watching this movie years ago, probably 2014, 2015, shortly after it came out. And I mean, a couple of years after it came out, but not too long after. And I couldn't get into it. I couldn't follow the dialogue because they use big words, and my stupid little mind just could not comprehend following along with that. So I was excited to get back into it, and I ended up really loving it. It isn't a perfect movie, but as far as modern Westerns go, and the expectations that tend to come along with modern Westerns, I thought it was fantastic, and it's definitely an underrated Coen brothers movie, and a movie that probably deserves to be talked about a lot more. Just for reference, my dad is a John Wayne fanboy. To those of you that know my father, that's not really much of a surprise.
It is not.
So I asked him if he has seen True Grit before, and he's like, "Of course, I love that movie." And I was like, "All right, which one?" And he's like, "Oh, the John Wayne, of course." And I was like, "Oh, what do you think of the newer one?" He's like, "It's fucking awful. It's nothing like the old one." And that tells you all you really got to know. Old white men who like John Wayne don't like this movie, and so young people who can appreciate John Wayne probably will.
I'm in the same boat. My dad is also a colossal John Wayne fan. I was raised very heavily on a steady diet of John Ford and John Wayne movies, True Grit being among them frequently, I'll say. I gotta say, I am a huge fan of the old one. I think, despite what people's personal feelings might be on John Wayne, because he's not the greatest of characters, in terms of actually being a person. I do love that movie. I'm particularly fond of a scene that I think we'll get to eventually. But I think John Wayne is. If you're gonna watch a John Wayne movie, this is probably like the John Wayne-iest movie to watch. Um, but one of my notes here for True Grit is this truly shows what a Western would have been with modern filmmaking. Because for one thing, it literally is a modern-made Western. But they keep like a lot of conventions that I think is what made those old Westerns really great. There's not too much going on that isn't literally what's going on. There's not a lot of subtext here. There really isn't even much in the way of score that's not just basic, like, rousing American frontier music. There's not much happening in the way of set design or anything that isn't the old-timey Western town in which the film begins in. And there's not much even really in terms of plot. The movie is they're tracking down that guy, and that's the movie. They're looking for Lucky Ned Pepper. That's the film.
That was something that bothered me at first because, I self-proclaim myself as being a fan of the narrative side of stories, and I think the more we openly talk about this, I realize that that's not always the case. And for this, it was something I was like, man, like there's not much going on, there's not much narrative, whatever. It's kind of a weak story, and then it's wait a sec, this is a Western. This is what it's supposed to be. And I think the reason why I loved it so much that I could never really put my finger on until just now is, like you said, it feels so authentic. Like it feels like if Clint Eastwood was still 25 years old, you could throw him in this and it would just be a classic Western. And I think that's the biggest reason why I appreciate this so much is it's kind of that nostalgic factor. It feels like a fun, beautifully shot Western.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes Westerns kind of an interesting piece of, I guess, art, we'll just generally call it, is that with a lot of, like if you got romance movies, there's all the subtext. What does this mean? How does this make them feel? If you've got a drama movie, like you're watching Citizen Kane, it's a lot of what's the subtext? What is all of this translating to? How are the characters growing as a result of this? With 90 to 95% of Westerns, that's not the case. But that's part of what makes them fun, is that you don't have to really be thinking that hard about what's going on here. Like if you're watching Stagecoach, it's like someone stopped that stagecoach, and like that's the movie. Like it's, and that's not to say there's no artistry behind it, because like one of the things you said, like you get this very like Ansel Adams beautiful landscape, the glory of the country kind of vibe from it, which is one of the reasons that makes it fun. They're beautiful. They're very rugged, and that makes them feel a very certain way. And that's part of what makes it beautiful. It makes it a little bit challenging to discuss because I got to be honest, Corwin, I really don't have a lot of notes here.
I don't either.
Yeah, because they're really, again, there's not too much to dissect about it.
No.
I have
I was
here.
concerned watching it because it was like, man, like I feel like we're not going to have a lot to talk about if I don't like find something to write down, because it's a pretty straightforward movie. You see what you get. You get what you see. I don't know which way the idiom's supposed to go, and
I kind of liked it both ways, honestly. Yeah. I liked that it was back to back like that. Most of my notes are from the beginning, because once they actually start chasing down Ned Pepper, I have like nothing to say. I love the negotiation scene in the very beginning with the horse and the saddle. Wonderful.
My biggest note is talking about, how much I like and just appreciate Haley Steinfeld's character, because she's just a no-nonsense, straight, cut through the bullshit type of person. And I just loved watching her.
Oh, it was phenomenal. And I also was a huge fan of the courtroom scene. I'm a sucker for a good courtroom scene. God damn it, does a good courtroom scene always feel so good to watch. And I actually think that also touches in on a big nostalgia factor. I think there's a deep history of the law in cinema that I think plays really well with the whole Western vibe. So I also truly appreciated that. And then my other like 3 notes, because I'm really running out of notes here, is Jeff Bridges is amazing, which yes, he is. Rooster Cogburn is such a great character because he is exactly who they say he is throughout the entire movie and does not change. Uh, and I truly appreciate that about him. And my last note is, man, fuck Texas, because Mr. LaBeef's character is really on his own fucking dick about Texas, and I got really fucking sick of it. But those are my only notes.
Such a, I don't want to say weird character because weird has some, I don't know how to describe him. He was a creep to start out this movie.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
man, like I feel like I kind of liked him at the end because he's kind of meant to be like like this guy is the good guy out of these two. This is the guy you want to root for. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, he's still trying to fuck a 14-year-old girl, like not quietly. Like he tells her to her face, like, I watched you sleep and I wanted to steal a kiss, but you're too fucking ugly.
And also delivers a very prolonged spanking, which got uncomfortable almost immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. That was immediately just like, well, he said he was going to do it. I didn't think he'd do it. Oh, okay, here we are. This is... Oh, Jeff Bridges is watching. That's fine. Okay, please, someone end this.
Yeah, he is so we know who Jeff Bridges is. He's like chaotic good, I guess, so to speak. He definitely has, yeah, for sure. But he's definitely doing all the, I guess we'll say, right things here. I don't think he does anything malicious, or at least nothing truly malicious. It doesn't have a more moral backdrop to it. How would you define Matt Damon's character in this, Mr. LaBeef? Because he is really fucking annoying and does almost nothing productive outside of like 2 things at the end.
Yeah, I kind of just viewed him as the stereotype Texan. Like he very much was a stereotype of himself where he's, too big for his britches. He thinks he's, a guy whose shit don't stink. And that's kind of what you get from Texas and specifically Texas Rangers of old. It's one of those things where I don't think he's obviously not meant to do much because that's the way you're meant to think of this character is kind of being oh, well, he's a piece of shit who spanks little girls that he wants to fucking bang. But I want to, because you said that Jeff Bridges was like chaotic good. I'm trying to find the right spot on the spectrum for Matt Damon's LaBeef. And I feel like he's more of almost a lawful. I feel like he's in between lawful good and lawful neutral. Just because, yeah, like he is a lawman, he is trying to follow the law, but at the same time, the way he tends to go about isn't necessarily the most straight and narrow. I don't know. Maybe that's not exactly the clearest path, and it shouldn't be held against him. I don't know. It wasn't something I really noticed during the movie, and it's just been so long. It's been about a week since I've seen it, so it's hard to really put my finger on it again.
What do you think about the idea? This is something I'm just thinking about as we're talking about it now. What do you think about the idea of him solely as a backdrop to make the Rooster Cogburn characters seem grittier? Because Matt Damon's very much so, or I guess the LaBeef character, whatever, is very much so like prim and proper and not drunk all the time and wearing clothes that aren't filthy and speaking in a more refined manner. What do you think about him as basically just as a piece of scenery?
I feel like he, in theory, would be really good as a piece of contrast, I guess. But I feel like Jeff Bridges kind of is the way he is on his own. He is that character to the extent where if he wasn't in the picture, I don't think your opinion of Rooster Cogburn would be any different. He kind of stands on his own. Um, I feel like, in a way, if Rooster Cogburn wasn't there to do, the best thing in the end, do the honorable thing, you would view LaBeef much worse, or maybe better. I don't know. I'm just having such a hard time picturing them on their own as standalone characters without each other because I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not feeling very inspired. I feel like my thought process isn't really coming together the way I hoped.
Yeah, well, I think that might also just be symptomatic of talking about Mr. LaBeef because he really does almost nothing for 85% of the movie. Like, all he really does is, like, get in arguments with, Cogburn and, I forget Haley Steinfeld's character's name, and then make, like, that big sniper shot at the end, and
Mhm.
I guess also and knock, Tom, what's his face, off of, Josh Brolin's character, off of, Haley Steinfeld at the that big rock. So outside of that one, piece of setting where he knocks, uh, uh, Tom what's his goddamn character's name? Do you remember?
I don't remember because he had a couple aliases.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But that fucking guy, outside of him knocking him off of, Haley Steinfeld, Tom Chaney, and,
Yeah.
and shooting Ned Pepper at the end, like, he really, really didn't do anything. And even in, like, his, like, epilogue where, older Maddie Ross, that's Haley Steinfeld's character's name, where older Maddie is, like, narrating, she even
Mhm.
says, like, "Yeah, I haven't heard from him since then, and, I'd like to, but, I haven't." And it's like, even that's oh my god, so fucking boring.
What'd you think of that ending? It's really anticlimactic, and
So
it it's something where I felt empty after seeing the ending of this, just because it ended in such a way where, like anticlimactic endings where it just kind of ends without any fanfare or closure. It's rare, but it's not like it's unheard of. But I feel like on the other hand, this was something where it it felt like it was just about to give it to you and then it literally vanishes and it made me feel so empty. Like it was set up to where it would have a very beautifully wrapped bow around this again ending, and then it gives you nothing and we're left with nothing, and it's just like, okay, shit.
so that's actually what I was eventually gonna close out with
Oh.
this, is that no, it's fine, like, if we're hitting it, we're hitting it, you know?
Hmm.
I never feel like the movie truly pays off.
Yeah.
And that's my big complaint with it. And don't get me wrong, I still am a big fan of this movie. I still really like this movie, and I'm still going to review it pretty well when we get to the star rating part of it. But with the big battle scene where Rooster Cogburn charges at the Lucky Ned Pepper gang and takes him down, and then gets trapped under his horse, and then LaBeef snipes Ned Pepper away. And again, this is not a spoiler because not only is this movie from 10 years ago, the movie before it is from 51 years ago.
Long.
So if you have not seen it, fuck you. This is your problem. Uh, but I'm watching it, and I don't know what was missing from it that I didn't care. Not that I didn't care, but I didn't feel like that big sense of just like relief or payoff or justice or whatever. And I think part of it's because of how fast it transitions from we killed Lucky Ned Pepper to oh shit, Maddie fell down the hole to oh no, now she got bit by the snake to oh no, now we got to run her into town, and then cut to she's 25. And I feel like all of what should have been like the really dramatic sit with you stuff that makes the movie feel a certain way at certain points just kind of got bump, 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 bump. Shit, this movie's running too long. The studio told us we had to trim out 15 minutes. Like, fuck, like we got to get this stuff out of here. It's got to be under 120. We got to make it a tight 110. And I feel like it suffers from that. And I don't know if that makes the actual ending less satisfying where she's older. Because, again, nothing happens, like you said, in that portion. Literally nothing outside of you finding out Rooster died 25 years later and that Maddie loses her arm. But I don't know. I wasn't like the biggest fan of the last 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I feel like I would have liked it a lot more if it was open-ended where they cut the movie right after he like collapses. I forget how the scene actually ends, but he kills the horse collapses, it dies, and then he ends up carrying her, and then I feel like he collapses, am I right?
He does. I think it's assumed he made it into town.
Right, I feel like
collapsed.
it's like right at the edge of town and
yeah,
all
there was
that.
definitely lights in the background.
If it ended right there, that would have been the perfect ending. At least the way it's edited now. It's just that is a nice stopping point. Coming back all those years later, building back up into what you assume is something, and it's just like, nah. It just doesn't do it for me, man.
It doesn't, because there's just no payoff. Like, it's not like she gets any type of closure. Or one of the things that we said about this movie going into it, or as we started the discussion, is like not a lot happens. The characters don't really grow in any way, and that's very true up until the end. But that makes giving it an epilogue feel bizarre, because Maddie, 25 years later, is seemingly the exact same person she was when she was 14. And Rooster Cogburn, you don't even get a chance to find out if he changed at all because he's just dead. And then, again, Mr. LaBeef gets haven't heard from him. And that's the only acknowledgement he gets. So it really, really feels pointless. It's lovingly shot, and I think the actual final shot of her walking away from the tomb is also gorgeous. And I can't help but think it's a waste of like 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty much sums up how I feel about that ending pretty well.
The one thing, just to go back to the fight scene though, that I truly, truly miss and that I absolutely love about the original of this movie is the old Winchesters that John Wayne fires.
Mhm.
And the old Winchesters that he uses in the movie are these kinds where there's like this little metal guard that runs over top your fingers, like a little bit of gap. Like it's not like you're really pressed against it. And the way that you cock the rifle is by pushing that out a few degrees and then bringing it back in instead of doing like a pump action or a bolt. And John Wayne is charging at the Lucky Ned Pepper gang, and he has two of them, one in each hand. And because he doesn't have the ability to hold the gun with both hands to cock it, what he does is he does this big dramatic spin move with the gun to get it to cock while moving, so he can just do it with the one hand. And he's doing it with both hands, like one at a time, just kind of spinning them around and shooting. And it's fucking wonderful, I must say. And it really adds like a little bit of flair to the whole dramatics of it all. And maybe that's one of the things that's missing from the new one for me that didn't really make it feel like anything, because it's just four dudes shooting at each other, missing a fuck ton.
I do have to admit, I really love listening to you describe how a lever action rifle works, because it's you describing it without me watching the scene in my head just did not make sense. But like, it's a lever action rifle. It's an old rifle. It's just it did not make sense in my head trying to picture it.
I didn't know it was called lever action, so thank you.
Yeah, I feel like that's like turned into this. I don't want to say stereotype. Maybe it is, but like that's the cliche. Like when somebody uses a lever action rifle, they have to spin it around like that now because of how just amazing it was watching John Wayne do it like 60 years ago.
And that's one of the main impacts. And that's honestly like the scene that comes to mind every time I do this. Plus, Robert Duvall as Lucky Ned Pepper is just Oh, amazing.
Mhm.
I really don't have anything else to say about this movie. Do you have anything else before we give it a rating?
You know, I have a couple little things, but at the end of the day, it's nothing major.
Plow
Uh,
through them. Let me hear them.
alright, if a young 14-year-old girl, let's say, you're in this situation, not you now, hired you to hunt down a killer, would you let her come? Like, would you, like, let her come along? Like, "Oh, she made it across the river. Let's go."
I think it's part of the Cogburn character because he did try his relatively speaking best to go on without her, but then she did it anyway. And I don't think he's good enough of a person to be like, no, go home. I'm not going forward until you're here, or to even go so far as to bring her back into town. I think that speaks to his ruthless indifference that he at several points shows, like willing
Mm.
to rip out the remaining chunks of Labif's tongue against his wishes, because he thinks it might be easier for healing purposes. So I wouldn't. I also wouldn't be hunting a man down to begin with. But uh, I think that's just again to speak to how little this man gives a shit about anyone that's not himself and the whiskey in his pocket.
Touche.
What else?
That was kind of it. I also learned, they talk about these guys being outlaws. I learned the actual definition of outlaw. It means someone who is outside the protections of the law. So anyone can kill him. And it's just like, yeah, you did good. Way to go, kid. And they can't be, they don't need a trial. They don't need jury execution or whatever. It's just, hey, they're so fucking bad. Just kill them on the spot. Get it over with.
That's not happening anymore.
No, 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 no,
You
no.
get the ACLU all over you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it can happen now. It just you got to be the right color.
Yeah, or Jeffrey Epstein.
Or rich enough, yeah.
Yeah. um, I had one other thing I was going to say. What the fuck was it? God damn it.
I don't know.
I don't fucking know anymore either. Damn. I'm not sure if it was any good, but yeah, whatever. All right, give me a rating.
Um, I definitely liked this better when I finished watching it than I do looking back. I think that's just because I loved the visual impact of the movie so much, and it was just such an enjoyable movie. But thinking critically about it, being unbiased, I'll stick. I mean, it's still a great movie. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
I'm going to be a little bit harsher than you, only because um I struggle so much with the end of this, and it is roughly 2 hours, which is a lengthy amount of time for a film that ultimately concludes in kind of an unsatisfying way. It's such an enjoyable movie to watch. It's such a I don't want to call it a romp because it's too serious for that, but it really is like it's weirdly easy to watch. And again, if you're a fan of landscapes, if you're a fan of old western vibes, if you're a fan of cinematography and filmmaking in general, or great acting, like it has all of that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm gonna give it probably a 3 out of 5. Um, Mostly because if you're looking for westerns, there's so fucking many, and you can find better ones than this. But I do still thoroughly. I don't think you're making a mistake by watching this. But if you were to ask me, "Hey, I want to watch a western. What should I watch?" This wouldn't be the go-to movie for me.
What is your favorite Western? While we're on the subject,
Oh, that's such a tough question. Um.
mine is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
Oh well,
bar
that's a
none.
fucking great
I
movie.
I think that movie is just perfect. I love that movie so much.
And you certainly wouldn't be wrong. The ones that jump out to me off the dome are, of course, actual, literal, original True Grit, um, because we're talking about it right now. Off the top of my head, I would also have to go with The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, or really any of those, any of the Fistful of Dollars series. They're all wonderful. Another John Wayne movie. I have a lot of John Wayne movies in my top because, again, I grew up on John Wayne movies.
I like The
So
Searchers.
I was going to say The Searchers is, God, it's so fucking great. Rio Bravo, I've also seen a bajillion times. The Shootist, as for another John Wayne movie, are all great. Another Sergio Leone movie, Once Upon a Time in the West.
Jeremiah Johnson.
Which one?
Jeremiah Johnson.
I have not seen that one. Or is that a man?
It's a man and a movie.
Don't know it.
With Robert Redford.
Oh, okay.
You know the gif of the bearded Robert Redford just, out in the snow looking at the camera, just smiling, just a single nod.
Yeah.
That's Jeremiah Johnson.
Oh, well, there you go. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Jimmy Stewart. It's amazing. Outlaw Josie Wales.
I do love Outlaw Josie Wales.
It's a great movie. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sitting here and just naming westerns.
Naming movies.
Yeah, we really just are. But yeah, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Which, in my mind, again, 3 is like good. 3 is a good, solid movie. So that's where I'm gonna land with that. That will bring us straight into the 2010 film, 2001 film. The Royal Tenenbaums, directed by Wes Anderson. Huh?
Another Western.
A classic Western. A classic city Western. One of those city Westerns. The Royal Tenenbaums, directed by Wes Anderson, written by Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson. It was nominated for a single Oscar for writing for Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson. So if anyone ever asks you, does Owen Wilson have an Oscar nomination? Yes, he does. Shockingly so. For writing. Something I did not know he did before I got into Wes Anderson movies. Starring Gene Hackman, Angelica Houston, Ben Stiller, Gwyneth Paltrow, Luke and Owen Wilson, Bill Murray, Danny Glover, and Alec Baldwin as the narrator, among others, I assume.
Such a great cast.
It's a phenomenal cast. The estimated budget for this film was $21 million. It had a cumulative worldwide gross of $71.4 million. So a relatively good success. Mm-hmm. It also runs at the exact same runtime as True Grit, 110 minutes. It centers around a eccentric family of dysfunctional family reluctantly gather around under the same roof for various reasons. And that's what it says on IMDb. Corwin, what do you think of this movie?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, like True Grit, Wes Anderson, the director, has such a distinct visual style that it kind of overshadows the rest of what he does well with filmmaking. I mean, his camera work is fantastic. I love his framing. Composition is always phenomenal with him. My biggest note is probably that, it's such a technically, I don't want to say perfect, but such a technically unique and just fantastic film that I am often distracted from the finer narrative points of the movie because I'm so focused on looking at, the composition, the lighting, the framing, the camera movements, the character movements, just the little subtle things that if you were just half paying attention, you wouldn't really see. Just, I love him as a director. I don't know if he would ever be. I don't know if he would ever direct like one of my all-time favorite movies, but at the same time, I don't think he would ever direct a movie that I could say that I truly hated. He's just so consistently good at what he does, and what he does is so fun to watch. That when he is at his best, you end up with the Royal Tenenbaums.
Fun fact: Scott Rudin produced both True Grit and the Royal Tenenbaums.
Damn!
How funny is that?
That is very funny. What a coincidence!
Yeah, truly. We did not plan this.
This would be, if we were smart, this is where we would have our interview with that guy because we planned this ahead. But
coming to the stage, Scott Rudin. Anyway,
he showed up when you did that.
Yeah, magically so. He appeared at the bottom of your screen. Just kidding. This is audio format, folks. In case you were wondering. Anyway, this is an interesting film because it's the first what I'll call Wes Anderson-y film. So if you watch Wes Anderson's previous two films to this, which are his first two films, Rushmore and Bottle Rocket, they are nothing like what we know Wes Anderson films to be now, which are like very particularly curated color palettes and a lot of symmetrical shots, a lot of strenuous detail on what's happening. Not that those two films lack that, but it's not nearly to the same extent as what you get here. Like this is very much of the precursor to everything else that eventually follows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to see it kind of take shape here. I have so many notes about so many of the actors because I just think this film is so well cast. The first note I have written down here is, God, I miss Gene Hackman. He's not dead; he just retired. And wow, every time I watch him in a scene, I realized how much I missed watching him do things. What do you think about the Royal? That's his name in the character, Royal Tenenbaum. What do you think of the Royal Tenenbaum character in this?
At the end of the movie, I appreciated what he'd done, but he's such a piece of shit throughout the rest of the movie. It's hard when like you're not emotionally involved with his character to like forgive that. Like I wanted to forgive him because, he showed character development, he improved as a person. He tried to right his wrongs and do things for the right reasons, but at the end of the day, like, man, still a piece of shit, and he spent 99% of his life being a piece of shit. I don't know. It's one of those things where I'll start off with saying I very much enjoyed this movie. I very much liked this movie. I don't want to say love. That's a big commitment word. But the biggest qualm I have with it is the character development just seems so sudden and without any conflict. It's just every time a character would go from being, oh, this is the one-sided negative aspect of them, to, oh shit, I'm over that now, time to be better. It was just so immediate. It's like there was one major event and then we're moving past it and we're going to be a better person from now on. And it just, it happened with Gene Hackman to probably the least extent. No, even then it's a singular event and it's like, oh shit, I'm going to be better now. I'm going to be a good father. I'm going to be a good ex-husband and support my ex-wife. And it just distracted me from so many of the other better things about this that, like, visually my opinion is known. I just said it, but as far as, the story and the character development, it was distracting.
I am going to take the opposite opinion of you. I actually am a huge fan of the character development in this film. And I think it's most obvious with Gene Hackman because he occupies so much of the screen time. He is the main character. He tries his intention at the beginning of the film, I think, is good. He wants to be a more present father in some respects. He wants to he has feelings towards his wife in some way. He doesn't really spend time reflecting upon what that is. He doesn't really spend time reflecting on what the best way it is to reconnect with his children. And he chooses to do it in the way he's lived his life the entire time he's lived his life, which is like a complete piece of shit and lying to them and being an asshole and manipulating them and going to great extents to make his lies seem as realistic as possible and double down as frequently as he can on being a bad person.
See, I disagree with that, though. I feel like the only reason he's doing this is because he's out of money and is being evicted, not because he wants to, rekindle the flames of, his family life and his marriage. It's just he has no other option, so he's gonna use his manipulation to get back in with the family.
I was
And
about to get to that. Yeah.
okay. All right. Sorry I cut you off.
No,
Go
that's
ahead.
okay. I was going to say, and a lot of it comes from the fact that he is being uprooted from his lifestyle, but at the same time, that's not an uncommon way for change to come about when it's forced upon you. And I think he's a pretty shitty guy that comes to the realization when he's put in the environment that he actually does care a lot more than he had anticipated. And that's one of the narrated lines from Alec Baldwin, that when he does eventually get kicked out of the historic Tenenbaum house, he says these were the best 6 days or
6
some shit
days.
of my life, that like he realized he actually meant it, and that was a big turning point for him. And it happens gradually. Like he realizes that he can't be a dick and win, as he has literally never done. He's lost seemingly every single aspect of his life from his assholishness, and he's maybe suddenly coming to the realization of it now that he's been kicked out of his home a second time after falsing falsing an illness. Um, he does slowly start to realize that he has to come to terms with who he is and who he's been, and that he can't brute force his way through manipulation anymore. And he has to do things like actually make an attempt at being there for his kids, actually make an attempt at finding a job and not being a freeloader. And he comes to these stages throughout the film.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at it like that. It's just it seems so sudden. Like it just the intentions from the start seemed purely selfish and basically is every act of his is selfish in nature in my mind, and the root goal of every action is to better his standing in the family so that he can essentially stay in that Tenenbaum house until Richie tries to kill himself. And even then it's just there's no conflict outside of these specific instances for each character, that there's no payoff to the development in the end. Like you don't see any growth with Gwyneth Paltrow's Margot until Richie kills himself. Even then, she is very standoffish, and then they meet up in the tent, and oh, she is a completely different character afterwards. Ben Stiller's character, his kids almost get hit by a car, the dad saves them, the dog dies, completely different character after. It's just there's no gratification from the change because it just is almost instantaneous. And that's the reason why I have issue with it. I just you go through some movies and there's this gradual change and it's little things that build up and they're making conscious choices, and it's like, oh, okay, they're growing, they're getting better step by step, they've earned this. Here it's just kind of instant gratification that doesn't leave any actual lasting gratification.
See, I don't know about that, because they address a lot of where these characters end up going throughout the film. Like speaking specifically on the Richie and what's going to call Margot characters, they mention frequently how both of them have certain feelings. Richie, like in like the first scene he's in, either narrated or dictated, I forget which one it was, they mention his feelings towards Margot.
Mhm.
And Margot's in a loveless marriage, and she's not writing. She's uninspired. She's we later find out constantly cheating on her husband. She's cheating on him with Eli, the best friend character. And then we find out that one of the reasons they had gotten together was that she really just thought of Richie when she was with him, and like that's all they ended up talking about. That was the catalyst for the relationship. And I will agree that everyone does change, see the most drastic change after the big events, but I'd also argue that that's the big events. That's the point of them, and if there's ever going to be a time for big change, it's after big events. Richie's attempted suicide in there forces Margot to really consider how she values him and how she looks at him, because she has to accept a world or the possibility of a world without him in an even greater extent than was there when he was floating around the world on his boat. And Richie had already been living in the world where he didn't have Margot because she got married and moved on with her life. And his suicide attempt is largely just based upon the fact, or based upon the constant swelling of emotions he's had around her. We saw that when he found out she got married, he ruined his career, his tennis career. He blew up on the court, killed his career, so to speak. And once the day he finds out that she's been cheating on her husband with all of these people, she's had so many lovers over the course of over that marriage, that none of which were him, and some of which included his best friend. He had another blow up and attempted to kill himself. He's shown that volatility already, so I wouldn't even take that as being that big of a surprise. When it comes to Ben Stiller's character, he's clearly, it's addressed that his paranoia is born out of not born in reality. The moment he walks into his mother's house, when he's talking about the sprinklers, and she was like, "We don't have any sprinklers here either," and he was like, "We'll fix it." And him having to address how aggressively protective he's being beyond what's normal comes about when fucking, what's his goddamn name? Eli crashes his car into the side of his parents' house, nearly killing his kid, killing his kid's dogs, and then he chases him through the entire wedding party, through the entire house, just to scuff him up a little bit, and having to address the fact that he is probably being overly protective and overly sensitive, at which point Royal comes to help him grapple with his emotions to at least some relative extent. So I will agree that everyone's pivots are relatively large and quick, but I wouldn't say any of them are truly unwarranted.
I mean, I never tried to. I think I didn't try and argue that it was unwarranted. Just that I didn't get the gratification from it because it was very sudden. You still see these changes, and there's all very good reasons for why these characters are changing. And don't get me wrong, sudden realizations that come about, with drastic changes in character are, that happens in real life. People have these epiphanies, these life-changing moments, and it's just, this is the only complaint I have about the movie, and so I'm taking it in stride and just running with it. I loved every other aspect of this movie. I love the overall motif of coming together as a family, and putting aside differences, and using each other to kind of mend relationships. I love all that. It's just this one tiny little aspect about how these changes come about really just didn't do it for me. Didn't get the job done, and just was kind of, that's it. This is the only thing I don't like about this movie.
All right. What do you think the fake cigarette budget of this movie was?
Oh man. How much was the total budget?
Let me double check that figure, but I believe we come in right around 21 million.
I'd say probably 20.5.
Oh my god, every single, there's not this much smoking in movies anymore. It's insane.
There's not this much smoking in real life anymore.
You're not wrong. Jesus, it's aggressive. It is an aggressive amount of fake cigarette smoking.
God.
Which feels, what I'm saying is, it feels weird because I'm so used to it in movies that take place in the 50s or are from literally the 50s, but it's so weird to see in a movie that takes place and is from 2001. I don't know why it threw me off so much. Not that I don't think it fit like their characters, but goddamn, it was weird seeing such an aggressive amount of also indoors cigarette smoking.
Does it like is there a clear time period when this is supposed to take place, or is this just 2001, whatever?
I would just assume 2001.
Yeah. I was gonna go somewhere with that, but then I realized that smoking indoors was totally a thing in 2001, and that was like 10 years later that it became a taboo thing. So yeah, there's my point. That's a good one, Corwin. Good job.
Solid, buddy. What do you think of Danny Glover's character? Because I also wrote down how much I miss watching him do things on movies.
He was like the only genuinely good person from the start. Like, every other character, every one of the Tenenbaums and, close cohorts were assholes to start out this movie. And, that's kind of the point. But like, Danny Glover is just like this really nice guy that just happens to be caught up in the middle of it. And he's the only one that, like, granted, everyone else is going from very bad to decently okay, fairly good at the end. But like, he stands true, man. He's a good fella.
Well, actually, that's an interesting. Let's talk real quick about what's the matriarch Ethelene Tenenbaum, because I constantly forget all of the scenes she's in because she doesn't. I would say she's not an asshole because I would say she doesn't do anything in the movie other than deliberate over whether or not to marry Danny Glover, which is really just serving as a catalyst for some of the ensuing events. What do you think about her character?
She's a side character. I mean, through and through. Like, the only reason she's considered a part of the main cast is she shares that name and relationship with the rest of the main characters. I mean, she doesn't go through any major change. She doesn't really change as a character throughout. She is never inherently a bad person. She's never inherently a good person. She's just kind of there because they need a like you said, a matriarchal character.
How do you feel about her character? Would you rather have seen more of her, or are you comfortable and feel content with how much you got?
I was totally comfortable with seeing the amount of whatever her name was, Angelica Houston, as we got. What was the name of her character? Ethelene?
Ethelene, yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is I want to sit here and say that, I wish she had more to do because I loved Angelica Houston. I think she's a lovely actress. She's very good at what she does, and I think she's wonderful in this. But at the same time, I think if we had yet another character having to go through a big transformation in some kind of way, it might have been too much.
Yeah.
I think the mild backdrop that she provided is honestly all I really needed from her. And I feel almost bad saying that.
I mean, as is, there was almost too many characters to get any real significant depth for any more than one or two of them. And I guess that was one of the other complaints I had, but kind of tied into that character development is just there wasn't a whole lot of depth to the characters until the very end. They were very one-dimensional. They had their unique qualifying characteristic, and that was kind of that. And I feel like if you gave Angelica Houston any more screen time, it just would have accentuated that.
Speaking of on again character development in this film, I would say the one character that I don't think we get enough of in terms of development, whether it's sudden or otherwise, is the Bill Murray character.
Yeah.
Or Bill Murray's character. There's not a Bill Murray character. It's Bill Murray playing a man. Because he gets like a fair amount of screen time for a guy that at the beginning of the movie is trying to write a book about a psychological phenomenon that he's discovering, and at the end of the movie has written the book about the psychological phenomenon he's working on discovering. Without really much change in between, at least not much of anything that I saw. What do you think about the Raleigh St. Clair character?
Him and Dudley are by far my favorite two characters and my favorite aspect. They are just, I mean, it's Bill Murray, so it's what you expect. He's absolutely hilarious in every scene he's in. Well, except for the one in the hospital, that one's pretty sad. But I thought Dudley was absolutely hysterical. I mean, you could say this about almost all of Wes Anderson, but just the natural comedic timing that he shows throughout the film is probably the most underappreciated and under talked about aspect of his filmmaking. I mean, like everyone focuses on the color palettes, on the technical aspects of his film, but he just has a way with this timing of dialogue and character expression where it's magical how funny it is, just inherently. And those two especially were just perfect in this movie.
I agree. As vehicles for comedic relief, perfect. I think if there was just one scene of Bill Murray moving on with his life in some way that wasn't just and his book got published and now they're touring, I would feel as though the bow was put on that loose end. But I'm definitely not going to complain about the characters. I fucking love those two characters together. They're wonderful.
I would love a spin-off not buddy cop, but like buddy adventure movie with just St. Clair and Dudley.
Oh, I would watch the shit out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Murray, a big part of why Wes Anderson is successful in the first place, he asked to be in Rushmore, the second Wes Anderson film, and really gave a lot of clout to that film, and really allowed it to get as much attention as it ended up getting, and then ultimately led to Bill Murray being in basically every Wes Anderson film and a lot of Wes Anderson's later success. So Bill Murray, a huge part of the Wes Anderson filmmaking experience.
I honestly can't think of a post Rushmore movie that Bill Murray hasn't been in.
Again, I'm not really sure there is one. I mean,
is he in the Darjeeling Unlimited? Whatever, I forgot the name of it.
Darjeeling Unlimited? I don't recall offhand, but again, I'm just gonna assume yes. Anyway, do you have any points that we have yet to
actually.
Huh?
He's in the Darjeeling Limited.
Again, not surprised. What are some of do you have any other notes really about this film? I think we covered a lot of like the major themes. This film, just real quick before I let you answer the question I literally just fucking asked you. I was thinking about it after watching True Grit, because I feel like it's very like True Grit in the sense where it's these events unfurling, but not a lot of subtext, which I think is actually weird for a film like this, where there's usually a lot of subtext. But the characters are pretty stripped down to their bare essentials. There's not a lot of depth behind any of the characters, which I think is fine. I think it works really well in the film because that it's more about them as a whole than it is about them individually, and giving any of the characters more depth would involve this movie probably being like an hour longer. But I don't have too many like plot-based notes or like thematic notes, because it just kind of moves forward in a Western style way. It just kind of marches straight on towards the end, which I do like, but it left me without really having much written on my notebook.
I have a ton of technical notes. Also, before I go into it, I just looked it up. Bill Murray is in every single Wes Anderson movie besides Bottle Rocket.
Perfect. Love it.
Yeah, little Easter egg for you. Yeah, I mean, I have a ton of technical notes. Love the use of just the wide angle lens, single shot, just perfectly, framing the character amongst the scene. He really gives you a chance to just appreciate the little details of the actors' body language, their movement. Speaking of which, there's very little camera movement, and when it is, it's very simple. Ton of tripod shots. I just very steady camera in a singular spot, pans here, tilts there, very simple movement. Doesn't distract you with that movement, and just lets you appreciate the very well put together composition in front of you. That's why I love him so much. Everything's framed within frames. It's just I can't help but notice these things. It's what I watch when I watch Wes Anderson. That and I said about the comedic timing, the one-liners are just fantastic in this. They're fantastic in every Wes Anderson movie, but was there any that like you still remember that stick out to you?
Dudley pointing out all the dents in the taxi. That is by far one of my favorite scenes.
My favorite was almost a complete throwaway. When Royal gets kicked out. What was the name of the butler? I forget that off the top of my head. Pagoda, yeah. He fucking just stabs him out of nowhere. And Royal just goes, "That is the last time you stick a knife in me."
Love it.
And then never make reference to the fact that Pagoda stabbed him multiple times again. Oh, I love that. There's so many little things, like there's a lot of character defining one-liners too. Like I wrote a bunch of them down. Like for Margot, Riley St. Clair, they're in the hospital. He's like, "Hey, you nearly killed your brother." And she's just like, "Yeah, it fucking doesn't matter. Whatever." Royal talking to his grandsons for the first time at the basketball courts. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Your mother was a terribly attractive woman." As if that is the only thing he bothers to remember about her. I don't know. It's just little things that I noticed and appreciated, and I think Anderson does well when he writes these movies.
So I have a couple of pieces of trivia if you'd like to hear them.
Love to.
Gene Wilder turned down the role of Royal Tenenbaum.
Why? Does it say?
He had officially, in his mind, been retired and didn't feel like breaking his retirement.
I could definitely see Gene Wilder doing it and doing it well.
I think it'd be a totally different movie.
Yeah, definitely would be different, wildly different. But
actually, that is one of my very few notes here about Gene Hackman's performance in this, because he brings so much. What's the word I used for him in particular? I can't find it, and I don't feel like sitting here and reading. But very enigmatic. He's
please
so
describe what that word means.
Huh?
Please describe what that word means. I don't know if I've heard that before.
Difficult to interpret or understand and mysterious. That is the dictionary definition.
Thank you.
And he just has this weird energy about him. He's likable because he delivers his lines with like a lot of mustard. He's dislikable because of literally everything he does for the first like hour of this movie. He has like a lot of intrigue behind him. He brings so much to the character of Royal that I think if it was a different person, it would be either too in the goofball direction that it wouldn't be able to be taken seriously, or too stern that a lot of the silliness of the character wouldn't come through. So I really like Gene Hackman, particularly in this. But that's that.
I liked him. I mean, I'm not the biggest Gene Hackman fan in the world. I definitely don't appreciate him the way you do. But
have you ever seen The Conversation?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever seen The Conversation?
Yes.
Very,
very good in that.
Love that fucking movie.
Do you want to know? I don't know why, but the movie I think of when someone says or brings up Gene Hackman is Behind Enemy Lines.
Oh, that's a great movie, though.
First time, every time.
I mean, that's fucking. I always think of either The Conversation or The French Connection, but those are kind of like basic bitch Gene Hackman movies. Actually, You know what's also one of the first movies that comes to mind when I think of Gene Hackman, and I actually think about it periodically while I was watching this movie, is Welcome to Mooseport. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It is his last movie. It is not good. He plays the mayor of a town called Mooseport, where Ray Romano also lives or just moves to, some shit like that. And they have like a mayoral race. Or like Gene Hackman's like the old guard, and Ray Romano has all these bright ideas or some shit like that. And fuck, it's not good. But it was one of the first Gene Hackman movies I saw because it came out in like 2004. And not that I saw it in theaters, it was I remember it playing on TV a bunch when I was a kid, and I would watch it because it was a movie and I was a kid, and it was a comedy with Ray Romano, that guy from Everyone Loves Raymond, and it had Gene Hackman in it, and that was the first movie I saw with Gene Hackman, and I always think about it when I see him.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
He won the election by 1 vote because he didn't vote for his opponent. He voted for himself, and he lied about it, and that's how the movie ends. Spoiler alert for Welcome to Mooseport. Also, another piece of trivia, just because I thought it was interesting. The original Hawk used to play Mordecai was kidnapped during shooting and held for ransom. The production crew could not wait for him to be returned, so the beard that appears at the end of the film that has more white feathers is a different bird. Yeah.
Okay. Like, sure, yeah. I mean, I guess they played that off really well with, writing around that, but like, who steals a bird?
Yeah, I know. How do you steal a bird?
I don't know. You're asking a guy who's never stolen a bird before.
Fair enough, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final points on the Royal Tenenbaums?
Man, I don't know. Like, I was very negative about the whole character development thing. But I mean, I do got to say, I still very much enjoyed this movie. Yeah. I mean, no, I'll stop it there. I don't want to just ramble on where I don't really say anything of note.
That's fun. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about that because it was the thing that we disagreed upon. It's not like we're going to sit here and just name all the things we like about it and just jerk each other off about how great they are. That's no fun. Give me your rating then, and we'll wrap up.
I still think this is a 4 out of 5. I still think it's a very, very good movie.
Yeah, I agree. I give this a 4 out of 5 as well. This is never the Wes Anderson movie that first comes to mind for me because I usually either think of the Grand Budapest Hotel because it feels just so incredibly Wes Anderson-y, or Rushmore because it's personally my favorite. But this is one of my favorites. I put it right up there with those three in terms of it. I always have a strong emotional reaction to the end. I don't know. I don't particularly know why. It just hits the right chords with me. I absolutely love it. I'm also going to give it 4 out of 5. I don't know what it's missing. Maybe it's some of the things Corwin said. Maybe it's something we haven't talked about that misses out on that last star, or even that last half a star. But it's such a good movie. I think it's accessible in a lot of ways that I don't know where I was going with that sentence. I think it's really accessible. I think it's easy for anyone to sit down and watch it. It's not like high art, like you're watching like Gold Door or some shit like that, some weird French shit. So yeah, that's all I got. You got anything else before we finish out, Corwin?
What's your movie for next week?
Oh shit, that's right. I have it picked out. I wanted to go with one I hadn't seen before, since so far I'd only picked movies I've already seen. And I'm going to pick a current movie, and I'm going to pick The Peanut Butter Falcon.
Ooh, okay.
It's a Shia LaBeouf vehicle, apparently, or at least he's in it. That's how I heard about it, because I was a big fan of Honey Boy that came out earlier this year, and I wanted to watch some more Shia LaBeouf. So The Peanut Butter Falcon is my movie. Corwin?
I had one picked out. Part of me wants to now pick Honey Boy so that we could just double up on Shia LaBeouf.
I would not mind. I've been meaning to rewatch it.
But I'm going to stick with my original one because I already wrote it down. I'm going with Collateral, Michael Mann from 2004. Okay.
All right. Right on. I dig it. All right. So we got Collateral and The Peanut Butter Falcon. I also, if we don't end up reviewing it, Honey Boy is a phenomenal watch. I Absolutely loved it. If you haven't seen it out there, I highly recommend it.
It's on Amazon Prime.
Yes, it is, and it is worth the hour and 45 or whatever it is. Spend the time. I know you got it. We all got time. Watch the fucking movie, you punk bitch. All right, anything else?
Nope.
All right, if you want to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at JuicingPod. If you want to hit us up via email, you can do so at juicethenumbers@gmail.com. And until Monday, y'all have a good one.
Bye.